Thank you for staying tuned. It is still the conversation here on Lagos Television, and on this side, we're discussing a very crucial topic. This is something that concerns us and concerns our environment. With the rising threat of climate change, flooding, air pollution, the need to preserve our ecosystem has never been more urgent. One of the most effective yet often overlooked solutions is tree planting. A simple act with long-term benefits for environmental sustainability, climate resilience, and healthy living. Joining us to discuss this very important topic is Joshua Dazi. He is the Programs Development Manager, Nigeria Conservation Foundation. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And together we'll be discussing tree planting and environmental sustainability, exploring its importance, challenges, and opportunities for all. You're welcome again.
Thank you so much.
All right, in my intro, I said that some of the forces threatening us, and when I say us, I mean we and the environment. We have a climate change, flooding, air pollutions, and what have you. And I said again that one of the most effective ways, yet overlooked, is tree planting. So let's begin by understanding why planting trees are important to a layman for the need to see a tree beyond just looking at it as a tree.
Okay, thank you for having me once again. So tree planting itself, like you said, is one of the effective but most simple form of addressing climate change. But to give it a bit of perspective, we'll just have to break it down into two important components. Number one, Africa as a whole may not really be a bigger contributor of climate change, but the consequence of climate change is something, it's a reality that is already happening within and around us. And a typical example of some of these effects include things like flooding, especially in coastal community. But there are natural barriers that God has actually put in place to actually address some of these consequences.
That's for us here in Africa?
Yes, even especially for us in Nigeria. So if you look at the coastal line of Nigeria, particularly around the Niger Delta area, you will discover there's a vast mangrove forest. These mangroves are natural barriers that help to cushion the effect of the sea level rising, which is the aftermath effect of climate change. Because once you have the polar ice melting, they usually have sea level rise. And once there's sea level rise, there is a flood that will occur, especially around the coastal community. And in that particular area, you will discover that sometimes it will wipe out a complete community out. So, but because of these natural barriers that are in place, they help to reduce the impact of this erosion. So, trees themselves play very, very important. Like I said, if you look at it in terms of addressing the effect that we're already facing in terms of climate change, they are there providing those kind of barrier and then reducing the impact of what we naturally must have experienced in terms of climate issue. And then if you look at Lagos, for example, you discover that about 30 years ago, if you look at the stretch of Lagos coastline, there are mangrove or natural forest belts that is closer to the ocean, but they're there reducing the impact of this flood and water getting into land area. But now you discover that residential areas are already in the ocean. Today we are talking about coastal road, but in the design of the coastal road is there vegetation belt plan in it that will also provide some level of cushioning effect in terms of flooding and all that. So one thing that we should have at the back of our mind is that when we take out natural barriers and then try to bring in man-made efforts, it's more expensive to actually handle than the natural barriers that God has already given to us. So trees are there providing this kind of easy but more effective ecosystem service that we undermined. So tree planting are not just something that we should just look at and take for granted. That you can imagine how much it costs to produce one growing that will ordinarily reduce erosion. And we have our trees there. It doesn't take too much to. It's just there providing those services that we do not have to spend so much on. But we have actually really undermining this importance. So for me, tree is just something that is more less cost effective, and then when we destroy them, we'll now have to pay the price in 100
I
folds.
want us to look at how urbanization has also come into play here, because you just said something now. Back in the days, we had these mangrove trees and all, but now that we have people building houses on places that we used to know was water, and do we have sufficient trees enough to be able to withstand, just in case any disaster happens, not praying for something to happen?
So if you look at the pace at which development is going, let's take example with estate developers. How many of those estates have green spaces? There are no green spaces. In fact, people want to maximize profits, in quotes, by building up the entire area without considering green spaces. And I want to cite example with Lekki Conservation Center. I don't know if you have been there before. So imagine Lekki Conservation Center is taken out of Lekki. The havoc that would have been in the whole of that axis would have been something that millions of dollars cannot be able to recover in the nearest future. In the nearest future. So now the issue that is there is that because these people think that they can maximize profits by building up entire area, they don't know that you are invariably putting a more dangerous consequence that will come, and then you end up spending more. The profit you think you are making, you are naturally not making that profit, because at the end of the day, you take that profit and then put it back into maintenance and all destruction that will happen at the long run. So estate developers or city development is not really considered with green spaces sometimes. Or even if there are green spaces, you discover that in one way or the other, corruption will come in and people will just build up the entire area. And before you know, because there is pressure in housing and all that, but again, people don't really put consideration on green spaces. So in specific response to your question is that the number of trees currently in Lagos are not even sufficient to address some of the benefits that ordinarily tree could have provided if they are there. So fewer trees are in Lagos compared to what it should ordinarily have been, because the green spaces are even disappearing rapidly.
Okay, now still again going back for a layman, what are the benefits of planting trees? Now let's look at its benefits to in all sides, the benefits of planting trees.
Okay, so when we talk about tree planting, what people basically understand, they just equate it to climate change. Because if you just say tree planting, the next thing that will come to the mind of people is climate change. But we less make priority to other benefits that ordinarily we get from trees generally. So number one, there are industrial raw materials that we get from trees, medicine from trees, food. All these are things that we derive from trees. If it gets to rural community, their livelihood is even more dependent on forests. And most of the product that they collect from the forest comes from these tree vegetations. So, but we undermine them, thinking that when you talk about tree planting, people just basically concentrate on climate change, carbon sequestration, but undermining the aspect of, like I said, the food, the industrial raw material and all that. But how can we sustainably take benefit of some of these benefits and then build our society? Because if you're talking about tree planting, you are talking about mankind's sustainability. Because everything that we depend on now, the raw material, the industrial raw materials, come sometimes from those trees. So if you take them out, you are putting those businesses that depend on this raw material at risk. So tree planting is as well, you can equate it to sustaining a lot of businesses and even mankind itself. So it's not just all about the climate benefit, but there is also mankind benefit in terms of raw materials, food, and even medicine itself.
I know that here in Lagos, July 14th is usually, is it July 14th now? July 12th or 14th, I'm not sure which of the days, but in July, we have a tree planting day, and that's the day that the state government, mandates everyone to plant a tree. It's done also across the 20 local governments and 37 LCDs in Lagos. But beyond the looking at it as a campaign day for planting trees, how do we help people see the importance of planting trees? And then, are there specific species that must be planted, or you can just plant anything as long as it's a tree?
Well, so when it comes to tree planting, there are criteria. It's not just planting any trees,
Okay.
because when you try to introduce something that ordinarily is not within that particular environment, it becomes a nuisance. So you have to plant the right tree in the right place at the right time in the right quantity. So I'll come again. You have to plant the right tree at the right place at the right time and the right quantity. Because if you, for instance, I'll give you an example with a very good economic tree, what we call neem, as a Azadirachta indica. In Hausa, it's called dogoyaro.
Dogoyaro.
So, but people can easily relate with that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very important tree. But what it does is that if you introduce it in an environment, it quickly take over that environment, because they reproduce rapidly. They have a lot of seed, and they just reproduce rapidly and then take over that environment. So they kind of displace other trees that are ordinarily supposed to be around that area. So you don't introduce tree in a place that it should not be there in the first place. But it's not that the tree is not important. But once you introduce them in a place where they should not be, it becomes an environmental problem rather than providing solution to the environment. So those things I mentioned must be considered to plant trees. So again, what you also said, the campaign for planting tree should not just end as a campaign, because what people does again is that you look for a day to plant tree, like the campaign that you mentioned, but people don't do a follow-up. You just go there the day of that celebration, you plant the tree. How do you nurture the tree? Because you have to nurture the tree and then ensure that the tree survive. You will be hearing a lot of tree planting campaigns, but do we do a follow-up to ensure that the number of trees that is being planted are actually surviving? So those are things that we must deliberately do or put at the back of our mind. While campaigning for tree planting, you must be able to work with the professionals to tell you those 4 factors I mentioned: planting the right tree at the right place, at the right time, at the right quantity. And then ensure that there's a follow-up, that that tree is surviving. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of benefit that you want to derive from that particular tree planting. It could be shelter belt, it could be watershed restoration, it could be erosion protection. So you can be happy to say at the end of the day, I have planted this tree and this tree is growing, and then I can see it, and then is serving the purpose to which I actually campaign for the tree planting. Because if Lagos State can sit down and look back, for how long have we talked about this campaign? Is it 5 years back? Is this 10 years back? How far have we gone? What is the number that we have planted in the last 5 years? Where are they? Are they surviving? Can we show evidence that they are there? So it should not just be something that it is annually, but there is no record to track, and then look at their survival rate.
When you also look at how to make this beyond, or move it beyond the campaign and make it a culture for people, let's also look at our education system. I know we have agric science, is that what it's still called now? I don't know. But we do agriculture in school. And how important is it to start teaching even from the basic primary education, the young ones, on the importance of planting trees, because these ones will also grow into adults and have their own places of living as well?
So for us in NCF, what we do is that we have a conservation club that we engage, even we partner with Lagos State government to engage children in conservation club. But the typical thing that can also be done to actually send down the message and then let them understand is a program that we are also doing with school called the School Orchard. The School Orchard is a place where it's a program where we try to train the children not just only on the environmental aspect, but also the plant-related engagement they can have. It has to do with things like planting of the trees, looking at circle of life, because you see, when trees are not in a particular location and then you try to introduce trees, there are other players of the ecosystem that will ordinarily return. If I plant orange, I plant mango, in no distant time, gradually insects will come.
Yeah.
And when those insects come, they serve as pollinators within that particular area. And then when the mango or the orange begins to fruit, birds will come. So you begin to tell the children that for them to understand the circle of life, that it is not just a tree standing, but there are other organisms that actually plays a role by you introducing something. And that's why I said you have to introduce the right trees. Because sometimes if you do not introduce the right one, it becomes, like I said, mentioned earlier, a problem, an environmental problem. So, but we use this school orchard program to be able to tell the children and teach them the benefits of planting tree, and then for them to also understand the circle of life, that everything revolves in a circle. So whatever you do, if you destroy this particular tree, you are not destroying that particular tree alone, but you are destroying a whole lot of organisms that at the end of the day, it will now come back to you, the human.
So, curious question now. What's the difference between planting a tree and planting a flower plant?
So they are all plants.
Okay.
They are all plant. And like I said, there are different purposes. They are in terms of plant classification, flower is different from tree. And in their role within the environment, also they differs. They differ completely in terms of their role in the environment. Every organism in an environment has a function that it plays. So, like if you look at the legumes, let me just come to grasses. Let me reduce the language. The grasses. So, you find out that the grass is being eaten by an antelope. An antelope can be eaten by an elephant. So that's a circle of life. So they differ in the role that they play, generally in the environment. But it's just a classification of where you say you have 5 children in the house. This person's name is Ada. This one is Chinelu. This one is this. So you can be able to have them differently with their different roles. So that's how plants are also classified. They differ in their ecological function within the environment. So flowers is you can classify them generally sometimes as the grasses, if I may use that layman language, and then you have the shrubs that is a bit bigger than the flowers, and then you have the trees like that.
All right, still talking about planting a tree now. What are the common mistakes that people make at the early stage of planting these trees that should be avoided?
So back to the 4 factors I mentioned. Mistakes, number 1, when you introduce the wrong tree at the wrong place, and even plant at the wrong time. Because now, I may decide to say I want to do tree planting or the campaign that you talk about. And then you now place the day for the general tree planting sometime in November. You know, in Nigeria, the rainy season has completely gone in November. So you plant, the plant half shocked, there's no water. So you did not give adequate care. And then you discover that when you come back in the next 1 to 2 or 3 days, the plant is already dead. So that's also a mistake. You must plant the tree at the right time where it has sufficient water and all that. Then in the right place, there must be nutrient consideration. Does it even have the adequate nutrient? Do you need to also support the plant with nutrient for it to be able to pick and then continue growing? So if the nutrient is not there, if it's just a degraded soil without nutrient, then you know that you're just completely wasting your time, because when you plant them, the tree will not grow, and then you will come back and find out that the tree is dead. So these are just but common mistakes, like I said, and it all circle within the 4 factors I mentioned earlier. Planting at the right species, at the right place, at the right time, in the right quantity.
All right, so for also trees that have big and deep roots, what are the things to look out for before you plant them? And how do you maintain this after planting?
So you have to look at also the area. And then there are different species. When you work with experts, they will tell you that this particular species grows very big. Like if you look at Iroko tree, you can have a maybe 300 square meter property, and then you now introduce 5 Iroko in the compound. So it cannot be done. So you have to also work with the expert to be able to tell you because at the nursery stage is just like the young seedlings growing, the young tree growing. So you may not be able to know that in the nearest future it will grow to this big size. So you have to also rely on expert opinions to be able to tell you that this species is not something that should be planted in this particular environment, because the effect may be if the aftermath effect may be detrimental for the building or wherever you are planting that tree.
Okay, just for emphasis again, how can individuals now take care of trees?
So now, for people to be, like I said, apart from just the general awareness that people should get involved, there are people that also have specific goal of why they want to actually get involved in tree planting. For instance, if I have a compound and I discover that maybe the environment is too hot, and my goal is to do a natural vegetation that will help to cool the environment, then you can be able to work with, make consultation, talk to experts, and then they can tell you the tree that you can plant within the compound space, and even the flowers that you're talking about, they tell you, and then you can get involved in getting them within your space or your environment, wherever you want to plant them. Or you want to also, because if you get to places like the northern part of the country, you discover that during the dry season period, there are a lot of winds, and sometimes if you're not careful, you just wake up one morning and your roof is off the building. So if you want to plant the trees to serve as windbreak, you also have that particular objective. So like I said, the tree planting must be consciously built with objective, either for food, either for shelter, for medicine. So whatever your objective is, but in terms of national campaign program that everybody should get along in the tree planting, then you should know that, okay, you are also contributing to a national agenda where we are trying to address climate issue. But whatever be the case, there should be objective, well-defined for why you are engaging in tree planting.
I always say here that technology has transformed virtually all sectors. So let's look at how technology has also helped in improving tree planting exercises.
Okay, so in terms of the use of technology, there was a time I stumbled upon one particular website that if you are flying, I don't know if you look at your boarding pass or when you're about to pay for ticket, airline ticket, flight ticket, you discover that there is a calculation of carbon dioxide emission that that particular flight is going to generate. So telling you about the footprint, the carbon footprint that you are contributing to. So, but now what that website does is that they tell you that you can actually pay for a tree or two trees through that website, and then you make that donation, and then that tree will be planted for you. Even though you are not physically there doing the tree planting, but somebody is doing that because the money you have paid, somebody is using that money to do that tree planting. So that's a technology innovation where everybody is getting involved. You may not be directly involved, but in one way or the other, you're already paying for that services. So even if you say, okay, for instance, you pay if just 5,000 or it's 1,000, it's 2,000, to you it may be nothing, but somebody is already taking that responsibility on your behalf and then doing that tree planting, and which is an innovation that technology has also used to engage more people to be more involved in terms of tree planting.
I'm still going to stay on making it a culture rather than just a campaign. Now, for young people, how do you make them see the importance of tree planting as a way to sustain the environment?
So generally, you see, when it comes to issue of the environment or any profession at all, it's just to make it attractive. Once you make anything attractive, people will ordinarily chase value. But like I always tell people, in Nigeria, once you see a forest area, then the mindset of people is bush. But once that bush becomes source of income, it's no longer a bush. And like I mentioned earlier, the typical example is Lekki Conservation Center. Lekki Conservation is now a tourism destination site where people begin to see value for actually going there for leisure, and also to actually, because even in Lagos, Lekki Conservation Center have one of the most, in fact, the clean air in Lagos is in Lekki Conservation Center, and that has also been confirmed even by World Bank themselves. So now, if you want people to get involved in things, is just to find a way to, but again, beyond just the attractiveness in terms of monetary value, you have to look at it in terms of your own welfare. So the consciousness is about yourself. If this thing is no longer there, the implication of what will happen to you yourself, because you have polluted air, you have disease outbreak and all that. So we have to let people understand that sometimes it is not just all about the benefits. But again, I'm also saying, I'm just trying to put it a coin, just to balance it. Yes. So while you are placing value and then getting more people to be attracted to it, and then making it a robust program where people can get attracted to be involved, and then you can also try to create a more conscious awareness that people should see the value of getting involved is to sustain mankind, to sustain your own self and your own family in a way, because by the time the environmental havoc will come, it's not going to be selective of who planted the tree and who doesn't. So it's going to be everybody getting involved. So those are the two ways I believe that if we deliberately and consciously look at it, then we can be able to have a sustained program that even the future youth will want to get involved, making it attractive, and then creating that awareness that it is not just all about the tree planting, it is all about sustaining your own self and family.
Like I said here, the Lagos State government every year takes a day out to, take out this campaign. And what more, since you're a professional in this field now, if you were to give some sort of advice on how well the state government can still push this agenda to the people, especially those at the grassroots, what would it be?
So Lagos is a bit peculiar because of the land space. Because if you tell people, today if I tell you I have 500 trees and I want to plant in Lagos, the first thing that will come to your mind is,
where do you want to plant them?
Where do I plant them? And then if you go to some particular area and then you tell people that, can we plant in your compound? The first fear that will come is, if this tree get big, the roots will start cracking my fence and my building and all that. So that fear is already there. And like I said, the peculiarity of Lagos is just so unique. The land space is not much available for tree planting. But again, one thing that people can also, that the government can also do, you will discover that there are a lot of estates already these days coming on board. Can we deliberately begin to speak with those people to deliberately include green spaces and green design within this estate? It's not everywhere that should just be concrete or everywhere built up. Can we have deliberate attempt to, or consciousness to say, while you are trying to develop this estate, there must be green spaces, there must be green design. And do you know that estates with even more green design are more expensive than those without? So why can't we just consciously begin to incorporate green design into our developmental plans? For instance, like I said earlier, the coastal highway, I don't know, there is no green belt. It's just the road facing the ocean. And if we're looking at, in terms of some road construction, can we also have some green spaces just generally in the design? So my advice would be that while some of this developmental agenda is being pushed, we can deliberately begin to look at, okay, how can we, within the little space that we have, how can we maximize the little space and then incorporate green design into it? Because, like I said, Lagos State is a very peculiar place where there is, in fact, tree planting in Lagos, people will just begin to look at it. What do I do? So no matter how you try to push the agenda, the question always comes, where do I do the planting? But I think these are just low-hanging fruit that we can easily harness in terms of estate development, renovation of constructed or rehabilitation of road, and then capitalizing on some green spaces to introduce green or tree planting within those designs should be a low-hanging fruit that we can consider.
We must leave this conversation here, but today I have been able to take out from these conversations that trees do more than just beautifying the environment. It does a lot more, and it is time for us to move beyond the awareness thing and then move into action. And he said something that the kind of say it again, please.
Planting the right tree.
Planting the right tree
at the right time.
At the right time.
At the right place. In the right quantity.
That's what I wanted to remember. Thank you so much again, Joshua Dazi, for your time on the conversation, educating us on tree planting and environmental sustainability. He is the program's development manager, Nigeria Conservation Foundation.
Thank you so much for having me.
The conversation continues after this. Stay with us.